By the time the doctors restarted the boy's heart, Damien Voss had already realized something terrifying. The son he abandoned 14 years ago was dying from the same disease destroying him. And for the first time in his life, money couldn't solve the problem because saving his son meant losing himself. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and fear. Damien stood motionless outside the glass, his custom-tailored suit suddenly feeling like a prison. Inside, doctors moved with frantic precision around the small frame on the table. Kyle's body jerked as the defibrillator shocked him again. "Clear!" Nora's sobs were silent, her hands pressed against the glass, as if she could reach through it. Damien's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. 14 years. He had convinced himself the boy was gone, dead, buried, erased by the lies Gerald had fed him. But there he was, alive, breaking. The lead doctor finally stepped out, face grave. "Mr. Voss, the boy's condition is genetic, advanced neurodegenerative disorder. You're the only viable donor match we've found. But the procedure, the neural transfer, carries a high risk of permanent cognitive damage, memory loss, emotional dysregulation, possibly the end of who you are." Damien's world narrowed to a single point. "Do it." The doctor hesitated. "You understand this could destroy your mind." I said, "Do it." Hello Everluxa viewers. Welcome to your #1 storytelling platform, where ambition wears designer suits and secrets hide behind mansion walls. Today's story follows a billionaire who discovers that the son he abandoned is dying from the very disease destroying his own family, and the only way to save him may cost him everything. This is a story about power, regret, sacrifice, and a father forced to choose between himself and his son. Before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. Now, let's dive right into today's story. In his penthouse overlooking the city, Damien had always moved like a machine. Voss Dynamics never slept, and neither did he. But lately, the cracks had appeared. A forgotten name in a board meeting. A contract he'd read twice without remembering. Tiny failures he buried beneath layers of control. Now, those cracks threatened to swallow him whole. The next morning, Nora sat beside Kyle's bed in the modest apartment they called home. The walls were covered with Kyle's drawings, spaceships, cities, dreams far bigger than their reality. "Mom, I'm fine," Kyle insisted, though his hands trembled as he tried to hold a glass of water. At 14, he looked smaller than he should. "Stop hovering." Nora forced a smile, brushing dark hair from his forehead. "You scared me yesterday at school. The doctors said—" "I know what they said." Kyle looked away. Later, when she stepped out to make tea, he pulled out his phone and typed with shaking fingers. "Can neurological diseases be inherited?" Damien hadn't slept. Private investigators worked through the night. When the files arrived, the truth hit like a blade. Kyle was alive. Nora had raised him alone after Gerald, Damien's own father, had lied and paid her off to disappear. Damien had believed the worst. He drove to their neighborhood himself. From across the street, he watched Kyle walk home from school, backpack too heavy on narrow shoulders. The boy paused, coughed hard into his sleeve, then kept going as if nothing was wrong. Damien's chest tightened with a pain sharper than any boardroom betrayal. Guilt flooded in, raw and unfamiliar. This was his son. His blood. The next day afternoon, Kyle collapsed in the school hallway. Students screamed as his body seized. By the time the ambulance arrived, Damien was already there, having followed at a distance, his presence unexplained and overwhelming. At the hospital, Nora's eyes widened in fury and shock when she saw him. "You have no right to be here." "He's my son," Damien said, voice low but breaking. Kyle woke hours later, pale and disoriented. Who are you?" Nora stepped between them. "Kyle, this is Damien Voss, your father." The silence that followed was heavier than any diagnosis. Kyle's face twisted. "You're my father? How come you never showed up?" Damien swallowed. "I thought you were dead." "Convenient," Kyle spat, turning away. But his voice cracked with years of unanswered questions. Nora pulled Damien into the hallway, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You knew about the disease all this time?" "I only found out recently," Damien replied, but the lie tasted bitter. "My father. He manipulated everything and I believed his lies." Tears streamed down Nora's face. "I waited for years. Kyle asked about you every night until he was 9. Then he stopped, because hoping hurts too much." Inside the room, Kyle stared at the ceiling, fists clenched. When Nora returned, he whispered, "So, when were you planning to tell me the truth?" His mother couldn't answer. The specialists laid out the grim reality the next day. Damien sat across from them, Nora and Kyle at his side. "The procedure involves extracting healthy neural cells from Mr. Voss and transplanting them. It could stabilize Kyle. But for the donor, the risk of severe cognitive decline is over 70%. Personality changes and memory erosion. You may not recognize your own life afterward." Damien's hand twitched involuntarily. Mid-sentence, he forgot the word transplant and had to pause, searching desperately. The doctors noticed, and so did Kyle. "You're already sick too, aren't you?" Kyle asked quietly. Damien met his son's eyes. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen and terrified. "Yes," he replied. That evening, in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, father and son shared an awkward moment by the vending machine. Kyle picked a chocolate bar, and Damien fumbled with the coins. "You don't have to do this," Kyle said suddenly. "I've lived without you this long." Damien's voice was rough with emotion. "I missed everything. Your first steps, your birthdays. I can't miss this." Kyle gave a small, genuine laugh, the first Damien had ever heard from him. It lit something fragile and warm in Damien's chest. Then Kyle coughed hard, and blood flecked his sleeve. The laughter died instantly, replaced by cold dread. Meanwhile, Mila Voss, Damien's auntie, visited the hospital unannounced. Her face, usually carved from ice, carried unexpected pain. "You're really going through with it?" she asked. "I have to." Mila's eyes glistened. "My son died from this. Gerald refused the treatment for him. He said it would make us look weak, and I believed him then. He destroyed my life and made me bury my own child." Damien stared at her. The woman he'd seen as cold and calculating now looked like a mother who had already lost everything. "I'm not Gerald. Aren't you?" she whispered. "Your father taught us the same lesson. Love makes people weak." The words haunted Damien as he left her standing by the hospital corridor. Later that night, Kyle woke up to Damien sleeping by his bedside hospital. He found some files on a tablet containing detailed reports, photos, and financial trails. Damien had been watching them for weeks after rediscovering Kyle's existence. Not approaching, just watching. When Damien woke, Kyle stood there, betrayal raw on his face. "You spent more money finding me than actually talking to me." The words cut deeper than any scalpel. Damien reached out, but Kyle stepped back. "I thought maybe you cared, but I was just another problem to monitor." Damien stood frozen, the weight of his son's accusation crushing him. "Kyle, I didn't know how to approach you. After believing you were gone for so long, I was scared I'd only make things worse." "Scared?" Kyle's voice rose, trembling with hurt and anger. "You run a billion-dollar empire, but you couldn't send one message or make one call. I was just data to you." Tears burned in Damien's eyes, tears he hadn't allowed himself in decades. Every report reminded me of what I lost. I watched you grow up from a distance because I thought staying away was safer for you. But I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Kyle wiped his face angrily. Sorry doesn't fix 14 years of living without a father. The next morning, the story broke. Someone had leaked Kyle's connection to Damien Voss. News vans swarmed the hospital. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's secret son fighting for life. Voss empire in turmoil." Kyle stared out the window at the chaos below, his face pale. "They're calling me the hidden heir, like I'm some prize." His voice cracked. "I just wanted to be normal." Damien stepped beside him, instinctively placing a hand on his son's shoulder. When cameras flashed wildly, Damien pulled Kyle behind him, shielding the boy with his body. It was the first purely fatherly thing he had ever done. Kyle didn't pull away, but inside, the pressure mounted. Board members called non-stop. "Damien, you can't step down. The company funds critical research. Thousands of jobs and lives are at stake." That afternoon, the specialists returned with more files. The lead doctor looked uncomfortable. "There's something you both need to know. The neural stabilization treatment keeping Kyle stable. It was pioneered through Voss-funded trials years ago. Some of the early testing was unethical. Patients weren't fully informed." Kyle's eyes widened in horror. "Your company hurt people to find a cure?" Damien felt the ground shift beneath him. His empire, built on cold ambition, had poisoned the very hope now standing before him. "I didn't know the details. My father oversaw it." "But it's your company," Kyle whispered. He turned away, fists shaking. "If I take this, am I just another victim of Voss greed?" The weight settled heavily on Damien's shoulders. Saving his son now felt tainted, built on exploitation. Damien reached for Kyle, but the boy recoiled. "I don't know if I want it anymore," Kyle said, voice breaking. "I don't want to owe you my life if it means accepting everything you built on other people's pain." "Kyle," his mother called out. "I can't spend the rest of my life taking care of someone who ruined mine," Kyle replied aggressively. "Stop it," Nora yelled. "He's not wrong," Damien whispered as he lowered his face to the ground. Later that evening, Kyle made his choice official. He sat up in bed, signing the refusal papers with a trembling hand. "I don't want the treatment," Nora gasped. "Kyle, you'll die. I'd rather die than watch him destroy what's left of his mind for me," Kyle replied, tears streaming. "I can survive hating him, but I can't survive watching him disappear because of me." Damien, who had just entered the room, felt the words like a physical blow. He staggered back, clutching the doorframe. "Please, don't do this." "You abandoned us," Kyle shouted, all the years of pain pouring out. "Mom worked 3 jobs while you lived in penthouses. I used to imagine you'd come. Then I realized hoping was pathetic, so I stopped." Nora broke down beside her son, pulling him close. "He waited for you, Damien, every single night until the hope became embarrassing. He stopped asking about his father when he was 9 because it hurt too much to keep being disappointed." Damien sank into a chair, the powerful billionaire reduced to a broken man. "I told myself I was protecting you both, but the truth is, I was terrified of failing you, of not being enough." The room fell into heavy silence, broken only by quiet sobs. Board pressure intensified the next day. Executives cornered Damien in the hospital's private lounge. "If you go through with this and lose your capacity, the stock will crash. Life-saving projects will lose funding. You're not just choosing your son, you're choosing him over thousands of others." Damien's mind spun. For the first time, he saw the impossible weight of his empire, not as power, but as chains. Walking away could destabilize everything, and staying meant watching his son die. He returned to Kyle's room that night, finding the boy alone. "I'm doing it," Damien said firmly. With or without your signature. I won't lose you again." Kyle looked at him with exhausted eyes. "Then you're still the same, forcing your way in like everything else in your life." Damien's voice cracked. "Maybe I am. But for once, I'm forcing my way in because I love you. Not for control or for power. Just for you." Kyle turned his face to the wall, shoulders shaking. "Don't say that now. Not when it's too late." Days blurred into tense negotiations. Kyle finally agreed to the procedure, but only after Damien promised he would step down from Voss Dynamics if the worst happened. The night before the surgery, father and son sat together in the dim hospital room. The air felt thick with everything unsaid. "I was scared," Damien confessed quietly, his usual commanding tone gone. "All my life, I turned emotions off because feeling things made me vulnerable. Your mother. You. I convinced myself staying away protected you from my world. But really, I was protecting myself from failing you. From watching you look at me the way you're looking at me now." Kyle's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted a dad. Not money or a hero. Just you." Damien reached out, and this time Kyle let him take his hand. The grip was weak, but real. For a few precious minutes, the billionaire and his son simply breathed together. No empire, no disease. Just two hearts trying to bridge 14 lost years. The procedure day arrived under harsh lights. Damien lay on the table beside Kyle's. As the anesthesia took hold, he whispered, "Whatever happens to me, live, Kyle. Live for both of us." Nora stood outside, clutching her hands. Hours passed in brutal silence. Surgeons worked with painstaking care, transferring the neural cells. Monitors beeped warnings. Damien's vitals dipped dangerously at one point, and Nora dropped to her knees in prayer. When it ended, uncertainty hung like fog. Months later, the city skyline looked the same, but everything had changed. Kyle walked slowly through the private garden of Damien's former estate, now quieter, less like a fortress. He had survived. The treatment worked. His symptoms were fading, strength returning to his limbs. But the cost sat on a bench ahead of him. Damien Voss was still alive, still brilliant in moments, but the emotional walls that once defined him had crumbled. He cried easily now. Small things overwhelmed him. A bird's song, a memory of Kyle's childhood he had missed, the sight of Nora's smile. The ruthless billionaire was gone. In his place was a man learning, painfully, how to feel. "Dad," Kyle said softly, sitting beside him. Damien looked up, eyes already glistening. He no longer fought the tears. "You called me Dad." His voice broke, and he pulled Kyle into a tight embrace, sobbing openly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Kyle held him, tears of his own falling. "I know. I forgive you." Nora watched from the doorway, her heart full and aching. The man who once abandoned them had paid the highest price. He had lost his empire's full control, his emotional armor, pieces of his sharp mind. Yet here he was, present, raw, loving. One quiet evening, Damien sat before a camera in his study, surrounded by recordings. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, not because memory failed him, but because emotion now ruled him completely. "Kyle, if you're watching this, I spent most of my life trying to become someone nobody could hurt. I built walls so high that nobody could reach me. I didn't realize that also meant nobody could really love me. Until I faced losing you. Thank you for forcing me to become your father. I love you, son, more than any company, more than power, more than my own mind." He stopped the recording, wiped his face, and smiled through fresh tears. For the first time, he felt free. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional billionaire dramas and unforgettable stories. and tell me in the comments. Do you think Damien was truly redeemed after everything he did, or was losing everything simply the first time he was forced to become human? I'll be reading your thoughts below. See you in the next story.